Yo, what's going on, guys? It's the Draft Nerd, and now we got just a few more teams that have their draft position solidified after this weekend's wildcard games. We still have the Rams and Vikings game still to come tonight, but for the most part, we got, the Buccaneers, the Broncos, the Steelers. We got their draft position solidified, so without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, coming in at number 1, we got the Tennessee Titans, and last week, I believe I went Travis Hunter. I had the Titans passing on a quarterback to go with just an ultimate weapon in a Travis Hunter. And although I like that idea, I don't necessarily think that Titans fans did. I think that they're ready to move on from Will Levis and go with a quarterback. And it's between two quarterbacks, really. Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur Sanders doesn't have the athletic traits or the high-end ability of a Cam Ward, but he's probably going to be a solid quarterback in the league. Cam Ward, on the other hand, might have a bit of a lower floor, but has an extremely higher ceiling than a Shedeur Sanders. And if you're picking here at number 1, I think that you're going to want to go with the high upside and a Cam Ward rather than a Shedeur Sanders. So we are going to go with Cam Ward to be the next starting quarterback for the Tennessee Titans. Moving on here to number 2, we have the Cleveland Browns, and I just think they're in such an interesting spot here. They could go Shedeur Sanders here. They could, go Travis Hunter, Tetairoa McMillan, maybe get an edge rusher to pair alongside Myles Garrett, or they could trade down and gain assets. I think that they could be a team in free agency to get a quarterback, maybe a, Kirk Cousins if he leaves Atlanta, maybe a Sam Darnold, depending on how he performs in the playoffs and if the Vikings want to let go of him. Maybe a Justin Fields. Really, anything is better than Deshaun Watson coming back. But I don't think that you're going to want to take a Shedeur Sanders here. I think that you're going to want to retool and, maybe get another year's worth before you try to get a quarterback to replace, that massive contract in Deshaun Watson. So, with that being said, we're going to make a trade here. We are going to be having the Las Vegas Raiders moving up from pick 6 to pick 2. Now, what are they going to be giving up? Typically in some drafts, moving up to the number 2 overall pick warrants a first round pick from next year. I don't think that's going to be the case this year if a team does move up with, say, the Browns. I think that maybe the 6th overall pick, round 2, and then maybe a round 3 for the 2, or it might have to be 37 and a second round next year. Something along those lines. I don't think that the Raiders would have to give up their 2026 first round pick by any means. But I think 6, 37, and then a round 2 next year could be around what it looks like. So we're going to offer that trade. It goes through. And now we have the Raiders here picking at number 2. And I'm going to have them getting their guy in Shedeur Sanders. Now, I know a lot of Raiders fans don't necessarily want to take Shedeur Sanders here, especially trading up like that. But I do think it's a very realistic possibility because if, say the Browns pass on quarterback, the Giants are 1,000% taking a quarterback at 3. So if the Raiders want one of them top 2 guys, they're going to have to jump the Giants, and that's going to cause some draft capital. So we are going to have them taking Shedeur Sanders, and I think that Shedeur could thrive in Las Vegas. I just don't necessarily know how high his ceiling is, but I think it's a good fit there in Las Vegas. Moving on to number 3 here, we got the New York Giants, and top 2 quarterbacks off the board. You're definitely not going to go with a Dylan Gabriel or Jalen Milroe here at pick number 3. You kind of just missed out on the quarterbacks. That's how it happens sometimes. And if I'm a Giants fan, which I am, but talking to other Giants fans, I'm not mad if the Giants don't get a quarterback here. Cam Ward is my guy. I would want the Giants to take Cam Ward if they were able to. I don't necessarily want the Giants taking Shedeur Sanders in the top 3. I don't think it's worth it. I think maybe getting a guy like Travis Hunter with the 3rd overall pick, and then maybe getting a developmental guy like Jalen Milroe in the 2nd round would be ideal. So that's what we're going to look to go with. This is only a round 1 mock draft, so round 2 is not going to be happening. But I think the Giants getting Travis Hunter, they need a cornerback 1 on that defense desperately. Deonte Banks is not that. I think he's more of a cornerback 2, and he can line up alongside with Malik Neighbors a few offensive snaps a game. That's a really, really good pick there at number 3. Now, who's going to be throwing them the ball? I don't know yet. Hopefully, maybe a Jalen Milroe, a Justin Fields, Sam Darnold, maybe in free agency. There's options for the Giants if they don't get a quarterback here at 3. On to number 4, though, we got the New England Patriots, and this is another interesting spot. I could see them going with a Tetairoa McMillan. I could see them going maybe an Abdul Carter. Could go a Mason Graham, Will Johnson. Could go offensive line and take a Will Campbell, maybe even a Kelvin Banks. Could trade down to get some assets. There's a lot of different, routes the Patriots can go here, but I'm going to end up going with offensive tackle Kelvin Banks. Now, I know he's ranked 15 here and we're taking him at 4. I think Kelvin Banks is a lot better than the 15th best player in the draft. Kelvin Banks has the potential to stick at tackle, something Will Campbell probably doesn't have. I think Will Campbell is more of a guard in the NFL. And if, for whatever reason, you really want to push Kelvin Banks in the guard, he has that capability, in my opinion. I think Kelvin Banks is the most versatile offensive lineman in the draft. I think he can stick at tackle, guard, and I think he'd be really good at either one. So we're going to get offensive line help for the Patriots here at number 4 and taking Kelvin Banks Jr. On to number 5 here, we got the Jaguars, and I think it's between maybe 3 picks here, and I think it's all defense. I think you could go an Abdul Carter here, could go Mason Graham, or could go a Will Johnson. I wouldn't be mad at either 3. I think all 3 are, valid picks in my opinion, but I'm going to go with Will Johnson here. I think pairing him up and being that cornerback 1 and having Tyson Campbell be more of that CB2, I think that's really going to be beneficial for the Jaguars. But I could also see them going Mason Graham, so that way they have Mason Graham, who's a monster in the middle, with Josh Hines Allen, and then Trayvon Walker on the edge. So that's really enticing to me as well. I guess Abdul Carter wouldn't necessarily fit. I forgot that they had Trayvon Walker, I guess. So yeah, it's really between Mason Graham and Will Johnson. I'm going to go Will Johnson though, but it could easily be Mason Graham. I think both are really good fits. On to number 6 here, we got the Cleveland Browns, who traded back from number 2. They got a little bit extra draft capital, and now they can still have their selection of an Abdul Carter, a Tetairoa McMillan, Mason Graham, Will Campbell. There's a lot of options still here at 6. And I'm going to have them going with a guy like Will Campbell. They need to be able to fix that offensive line. That offensive line was one of the best offensive lines in all of football like 2-3 years ago. It just got old really quickly. And I think injecting some youth into that offensive line with a Will Campbell who could play tackle or guard for them, I think that's a good option there for the Browns. On to number 7 here, we got the New York Jets. And I think them having Abdul Carter fall right into their laps is a really, really lucky outcome for them. They have a lot of solid edge rushers. Will McDonald's really good. Jermaine Johnson's a solid rotational guy. They got Hassan Reddick still, although I don't know if they're going to be able to retain him or even want to retain him. I think they're going to go into a full rebuild. So with that being said, I'm going to go with Abdul Carter to be that, absolute monster rushing the quarterback. On to number 8 here, we got the Carolina Panthers, and they spent a lot of resources last offseason, rebuilding that offense. And that defense took some hits. They lost Brian Burns. They lost Frankie Louvu, Jeremy Chin. So they really need talent on that defense. And I think a guy like Mason Graham could really improve that. They're going to have Derek Brown coming back, who's that big run stopper. Mason Graham could be also a really good run stopper, but can also get after the quarterback as well. I think you got to go BPA on the defense, and I think Mason Graham's that for them. On to number 9 here, we got the New Orleans Saints, and I think Tetairoa McMillan just fell right into their laps. I think that's a perfect fit. You have Chris Olave, who's that, speedy separator. You got Rashid Shaheed, who's that deep threat. And then Tetairoa McMillan could be that X receiver who can be a massive red zone target for him. I think that's just a perfect pick, and if he falls here to 9, I think they take him 100%. On to number 10 here, we got the Chicago Bears, and how this draft board has fell, I don't think the Bears will be happy with this. I assume the Bears will be hoping that a Will Campbell or a Kelvin Banks fall to them here at 10. Mainly a Will Campbell, because I think that their tackle situation isn't bad at all. They have Darnell Wright, who they took a couple years ago. They have Braxton Jones. I think that they more so need interior help, and I think you could get that on day 2. So I'm going to have them passing on offensive line here. And we're going to go with a guy like Nick Scorton to pair alongside with Montez Sweat. I think he fits their scheme a little bit more than a guy like Jalen Walker. Although I think I like Jalen Walker a little bit more in a vacuum. But Nick Scorton fits their defense a little bit more. On to number 11 here, we got the San Francisco 49ers. And, I know a good tackle for them a lot. But they need to, think of life after Trent Williams. And I think a guy like Josh Simmons could, replace Trent Williams to the best of his ability. You're not going to be able to replace Trent Williams ever. But I think Josh Simmons is a really athletic tackle who I just think could fit that Shanahan offense. So we're going to go with Josh Simmons out of Ohio State. On to number 12 here, we got Ashton Jeanty on the board for the Cowboys. But I'm going to pass on Ashton Jeanty. Everyone and their mom goes Ashton Jeanty. We know that's a possibility. But also a possibility could be Luther Burden here. CeeDee Lamb's amazing. who do they have besides that? Brandon Cooks is cooked, no pun intended. And, Jalen Tolbert did a really good job as being that, receiver 2 in that offense, but he's definitely more of a receiver 3. I think getting a guy like Luther Burden in that offense could be, what they hoped Brandon Cooks would be for them the past few years. So we're going to go with Luther Burden here and pass on a running back. And you can always get a Quinshon Judkins in day 2, and I think the Cowboys would be completely satisfied with that as well. On to 13, though, we got the Miami Dolphins, and, they need offensive line help a lot. Do I think there's one worth taking here? I mean, Armand Membu, solid, but I like him more as a guard. Josh Connerly, I recently watched some more tape of his, and I'm a lot higher on him after watching NFL Stock Exchange talk highly about him. I went back and watched him, and I like him a lot too. So, that's a possibility here, but I don't think I'm going to go with that. I think I'm going to go with Malachi Starks here. Javon Holland is probably going to be leaving in free agency. They need to get a really good safety to replace him, and I think Malachi Starks is a borderline blue chip player here. So taking him at 13, I think that's a really good pick. On to 14 here, we got the Indianapolis Colts, and I think I'm going to do what a lot of people do, and that's take a tight end here. And it's between two. Tyler Warren is probably the better prospect, but I think Colston Loveland's the better receiving option. So it really just depends on what the Colts would want. I mean, I kind of am leaning towards Colston Loveland, but I just think Tyler Warren's such a more versatile tight end. Colston Loveland's not that big. 6'5", 245, and when I mean big, I mean weight-wise. Tyler Warren is a bit bigger at 261. I think he could be more of a versatile inline tight end. He could also play out in the slot and be a big slot. I think Tyler Warren's just a more versatile piece, and I think that might be what the Colts are leaning more towards. So we're going to go with Tyler Warren here at 14. On to number 15, we got the Atlanta Falcons, and I know Falcons fans are probably tired of it, but it's best edge rusher available to them at number 15. And for me, that's Jalen Walker. And I really like Jalen Walker's fit for the Falcons. Jalen Walker could, rush the passer 80% of the time, but he could also be a versatile piece that they can draw back into coverage maybe 20% of the time. I really like that pick a lot. They'll also be getting Braylon Trice back, who they took in last year's draft, who hasn't even played for them yet, and I was a big fan of his, so they'll be getting him back, also getting Jalen Walker. I think their pass rush, production could really increase next year just with them two players, actually being on the team. Moving on to 16 here, we got the Arizona Cardinals, and I think they're in a bit of a similar situation to the Falcons where they just need help on that defensive line, or maybe even offensive line. They just need help in the trenches badly. And like I said earlier, Armand Membu is a solid pick here that could, definitely be the pick here. Could go Josh Connerly too, but I'm going to look to go defensive line here, and I think a guy like Shamar Stewart paired alongside Darius Robinson, who they took last year, having BJ Ojulari come back, I think that could be a really good and much improved defensive line going into 2025. On to 17 here, we got the Cincinnati Bengals, and they just have a terrible defense. That offense tried their best to win games for them, but that defense was just losing them games. So I think they got to go best player available on the defensive side of the ball, and a guy like Benjamin Morrison is really good, but his injury is a little bit weird. He could be picked in the top 10, or he could pick in, late day 2, maybe even early day 3, depending on just how serious that injury is. It's, I believe, a hip injury, which is never good for a cornerback. So we're going to stay away from Benjamin Morrison, and instead we're going to look to beef up that interior and take a guy like Kenneth Grant, who's just an athletic freak at 340 pounds. He could rush the passer while also being able to stop the run, something that the Bengals were not great at doing last year. On to 18 here, we got the Seattle Seahawks, and I know I do it a lot, but I'm still going to go offensive line for him. The only exception is we're going to go with Armand Membu, who I don't typically take in the first round, but after watching that stock exchange, I went back and watched a little bit more tape on guys that were high on, and I think Armand Membu, is solid as a tackle. I would probably see him as a day 2 tackle, but if you kick him into guard, I think he could be very, very good for the Seahawks. And the Seahawks more so need guard and center help as opposed to tackle help. So we're going to go with Armand Membu and slide him into guard for the Seahawks. On to 19 here, we got the Denver Broncos. And I think we could do something a little fun here. Ashton Genty is still on the board here. He's probably one of the better prospects in the entire draft. So him falling to 19 is a blessing for the Broncos, who didn't necessarily have the best run game in 2024. Javonte Williams is a solid back, but I don't think he should be a bell cow back. Getting a guy like Ashton Genty could really make that offense dynamic with Bo Nix going into a second year. hopefully getting maybe a receiver in free agency to, pair alongside Cortland Sutton and Troy Franklin / Marvin Mims. So we're going to go with Ashton Jeanty here to just really improve that rushing game for the Denver Broncos. On to number 20, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And after losing against the Commanders last night, I think you really got to go edge rusher here. Yaya Diaby was really good. Kalaji Kancey is also really good in the interior. But they need someone along the edge to pair alongside Yaya Diaby. And I think a guy like Michael Williams fits them perfectly. He's a bit of a bigger guy at 265. I just think he fits the Buccaneers and what they're trying to do. I think he's a little bit of a versatile piece as well. So we're going to go with Michael Williams to the Buccaneers. On to 21 here, we got the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think that they could go receiver here. They could go with an Emeka Egbuka. I don't think that's a bad pick at all. They could go maybe try to find a quarterback and a Jalen Milroe here. I don't see that happening though. I'm going to end up going with secondary help. Joey Porter Jr. is really good, but besides him, they don't really have much in the secondary. I'm talking cornerback wise. Obviously, Micah Fitzpatrick's really good, but I think Benjamin Morrison, again, this all hinges on the fact that he, passes his medicals at the combine. And if he does, I think that he could be a really good fit to pair alongside Joey Porter Jr. at cornerback for the Steelers. On to 22 here, we got the LA Rams. Again, I think they could be a sneaky quarterback pick here, maybe Jalen Milroe, although I'm not going to do that. I don't think that's the most realistic selection here. So we're going to look to go with, the tight end here. They don't really have a good receiving threat at tight end there in LA. I think Colston Loveland, although he's not the best blocker, I think he could be a really good receiving option, and I think that Sean McVay could really do some interesting things with Colston Loveland. So we're going to go with him there at 22. On to 23 here, we get the Chargers, and they just missed out on probably their guy in a Colston Loveland. Tyler Warren's also off the board, so tight end's probably not going to be a pick here. They could go running back here. I mean, Amarian Hampton's a really fun pick. I think him and J.K. Dobbins would be a really fun pairing. We're not going to do that, though. We're going to look to get pass rush help, I think. They could go Emeka Egbuka as well, but I think he kind of clashes with Ladd McConkey. You could, who else is on the board here? You could go with the Elike Umanor, although I don't know if I'd be willing to take that here. Instead, we're going to try to inject some youth into that defensive line. I know they have Khalil Mack. I know they have Joey Bosa. They're both pretty old. Getting a guy like James Pierce who could hopefully learn a thing or two from Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, and then hopefully be a really productive pass rusher for them in the future. I think he could be a good rotational guy year one, and then turn into that, really, really good pass rusher for him in year 2, 3, and 4. On to 24 here, we got the Green Bay Packers, and I just like this fit a lot, what I'm about to do, and that's Jahdae Barron. He could play on the outside, he could play slot, he could play safety, he could play all over that secondary. Jair Alexander isn't always, the most healthy guy in the world. So if Jair Alexander is hurt, he could be that cornerback one on the outside. Or he could be a really good slot player. He could just be whatever the Packers want him to be. He's just a firecracker in the secondary, and I think that's exactly what the Packers want. On to 25 here, we got the Houston Texans, and, they could go Emeka Egbuka to play that slot role. Tank Dell's, I assume, is not going to be playing much next year after rehabbing from that terrible leg injury. So we could go receiver here and go with an Emeka Egbuka, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to end up going trenches here on the defensive line, and I'm going to take a guy like Walter Nolan. I'm a big fan of Walter Nolan. I think he's better than TJ Sanders and Tyleik Williams, and I think he's almost a solidified first-round talent. I think he could provide a lot of pass rush on the interior, while guys like Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter can provide pass rush out on the edge. On to 26 here, we got the Washington Commanders, and they could go with Emeka Egbuka, get more receiving talent to go alongside Terry McLaurin, but I think they need to go trenches here, whether it's offensive line or defensive line. I think they got to go that. And, I talked about Josh Connerly earlier. I really like him a lot more than I initially thought I did. So we're going to fit him into the first round here, and we're going to have Josh Connerly going to the Commanders to hopefully be that replacement to Andrew Wiley, or even, play left tackle and slide Brandon Coleman into guard, which I liked him a lot better at guard coming out of TCU. All right, moving on here to the Baltimore Ravens. We could go with a guy like Amarian Hampton, who could be that eventual Derrick Henry replacement. I've seen that in a couple mock drafts, and I'm not opposed to it, but I'm not going to end up doing that in this mock draft. I think they could also go pass rusher here, like a Jack Sawyer, maybe a Mike Green, Landon Jackson, but I'm going to settle on offensive tackle here. That right side of the offensive line isn't the greatest, and I think a guy like Wyatt Milam, who just had a phenomenal season at West Virginia this past season, and I think he could slide into guard if you really need him to. I think he'd be a versatile piece on the offensive line regardless of where you need him to play, so we're going to go with Wyatt Milam to the Baltimore Ravens at 27. On to 28 here, we got the Minnesota Vikings. This is being recorded right before they play, and it's probably going to be posted right before they play, so don't know if they're going to be picking here at 28, but in this mock draft, that's where we're going to have them, and we're going to get fun with them, and we're going to go with Omarion Hampton. Him and then Aaron Jones being that receiving threat, maybe a bit of more of a scat back since he's getting up there in age. I think that's a very fun pairing, and so we're going to do that to the Vikings at 28. Moving on to 29, we got the Buffalo Bills, and I'm gonna go receiver for them. They have Keon Coleman, who they selected last year in the first round, who's that ex receiver. Khalil Shakir has had a breakout season so far for him, but I think that Emeka Egbuka could slide in perfectly and that be their three receivers. Keon Coleman being the X, Emeka Egbuka being that slot who can also play on the outside, and then Khalil Shakir being that speedy big play threat receiver. So we're gonna go with Emeka Egbuka here at 29 for the Bills. Moving on to 30 here, we got the Eagles, and they could do whatever they want. They could probably just go best player available. They don't necessarily need any one player or one position. They could also trade down here out of the first round and just gain capital. They could really just do whatever they want. But Nakobe Dean just went down with an injury. I don't know how serious it is. I think he might have tore his some type of tendon in his knee or leg, so don't know how long he's going to be out for. Zach Bond is a free agent, although he's most likely going to come back after the season he just had. But we're going to go with linebacker here and go with a Jahad Campbell. He's a bit of a versatile piece for Alabama. He rushed the passer as well as played off-ball linebacker. And for the Eagles, I think he'd play off-ball linebacker, who could be a really, really good blitzer for him and just be a versatile piece in the middle of that defense. So that's where we're going to go here to the Eagles. On to 31, we got the Kansas City Chiefs, and they're in a bit of a weird spot. They could go tackle. That's probably what they need the most, but there isn't many tackles worth taking here at 31. Cameron Williams is a good developmental guy. Ariante Urzuri, again, after watching the Stock Exchange podcast, I went back to watch some tape on him. He is a bit rounded in his stance, and isn't the most athletic guy in the world, so I guess he's more of a day 2 guy, although I do think it's possible that they take him here at 31. Same with Cameron Williams, but we're not going to go offensive tackle. We're going to go defensive line here and get a run stuffer in a Tyleik Williams. Chris Jones is a really good, productive pass rusher in the middle. Tyleik Williams can be that, really good run defender in the middle. So we're going to go with Tyleik Williams at 31. And then rounding off this mock draft, we got the Detroit Lions, and I like going Elike Umanor for him here. I'm not going to do that in this mock draft. I'm going to end up going with Jack Sawyer, pairing him up alongside Aiden Hutchinson. I don't know how happy he would be with that, with the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry, but I think he's just a really good Lions type of player. Really good run defender, athletic, and could develop into a really, really good pass rusher as well. So we're going to go with Jack Sawyer here to round out the first round. And then that's going to do it. Let me know what you guys think of this mock draft. Again, it's still early into the process. We are not even, through the NFL season. But, let me know what you guys think of it down in the comments. And as always, I'm the Draft Nerd, and thanks for watching.